Hello and welcome. In today's tutorial, we are looking at bringing our own data to ChatGPT and Azure OpenAI to enhance the user experience. This is a request that is so popular by enterprise customers. So here is a demo where I ask ChatGPT to give me a list of pain relief medication. And what this does, it goes and queries my knowledge base, gives me the list of results, and shares it back with me. So let's dive in and see how this is implemented in real life. So let's start by looking at our data source. We have this CSV file or a text file that's delimited by pipes. And as you can see here in the first line, we have what we call a header, right? So our first line is being used as a header where there is a SKU number, a short description, long description, price, and so on. In order for us to use this data, let's create a cognitive search. And again, if you haven't created your Azure OpenAI, I would recommend my first episode of Azure OpenAI. So I'll link it down below, or you can click here. So here we are just creating an Azure Cognitive Search. So we created one. And as you can see here, there is data sources, and you can press on the plus sign to import your data source. So before doing this, let's go back to the Azure portal and create a storage account so we can have a blob storage or a blob or a container that will host our file. So let's press on create resource and look for storage account. Once we find it, click on storage account, press create, and let's create a storage account. I already have created a storage account, so let's skip through this. Let's go back to the Azure portal and select your storage account. Select containers, create a new container if you don't have one already created. In my case, I have one created, and I already uploaded our medical products file. If you don't, you can easily upload your data source there. And as you can see here, let's actually take a look at the edit to just view what we have in this file, and it's exactly what we have locally in our computer. Let's toggle back to our data source that we started with, like when we created the cognitive search. Select our container. Now we selected the container. Let's give it a name. So we're gonna name it medical supply. For the folder, we're gonna leave it as is because it's the root folder, and hit save. Now let's actually go back. Once this is saved, let's go back to our cognitive search and select indexes. And here we're gonna create a new index. Create an index for our file. So as you saw, like we have what we call SKU number, right? Like from our file here. So going back to refer to this, instead of having an ID, I want you to use SKU number as our key. And here you go. And then what I'm doing here is I'm using the first header to add all the fields necessary to index, right? And I want, for example, the short description to be searchable and retrievable. I want the country of origin, right, where it's available, to be retrievable and searchable as well. So like I'm just going through like that, the headers, and including them as the keys or like the index that I want to be able to search on, right? So the long description, same thing for long description, and same thing goes for price and product URL. So I'll skip through this now. So now that we created the index, it's time to go to the indexer, because you can see here that the document count is 0, right? Like, so we want to make sure that our data source is now processed and the index is being used. So let's select the data source and select the index that we just created. As you can see here, you can schedule it for on a daily basis or hourly or once. Here, again, it's very important to know what type of data source you're bringing. In our case, it's text file, right? Delimited text. And the delimiter is a pipe in this case, right? So let's go back and say delimited text and insert pipe. And then the first line is our header. So once we press save, it actually generates our indexer definition. And the indexer definition, we have field mapping, and this is really important because sometimes what's on the index, as we saw earlier, right? Like we changed the ID to SKU number, but like let's say you have the ID, we left it as ID. We want to say the source field name is SKU number, which would map to the target field name of the index, which will be ID. But in this case, we have made sure that everything is mapped 100% to what exists in the target. So we are good to go. As we can see here, like once you do this, you just reset, all right? Like, so if anything is cached, we want to make sure that it's actually reprocessed. And then when we refresh, we can see that 10 documents were successfully processed. And if we go to our index, instead of 0 this time, it says 10. So if we do a global search, you can see that it returns our data. So let's say we are looking for pain relief medication and search for that. You can see that we are now being returned anything that has pain relief or like the desired result. Let's go back to our playground or IDE for Azure OpenAI, and this is where we're gonna put everything together. So the cognitive search that we were working with or just created, now we are putting things together. So all the plumbings, right? So selecting our cognitive search, selecting the content data that we want to include, so our ChatGPT will be aware of, right? In this case. And then, so selecting all the desired field here. Once we do that, press next. It's gonna ask us for the type of data management. Is it keyword or semantic search? We're gonna say keyword. And then we have the last step, which is going and talking to our chatbot. So we will see how this will work all together. So our desired result, if we ask it a question, for example, give me a pain medication or something like that, it will not only return the product, it's going to return the URL and also the references to our document, which is very important. And as you can see here, so it did a really good job at that. And then if we press it on the references, you can see citation 1, citation 2, which would refer exactly to our data sources. And that's a wrap.